The clinking of champagne flutes was a dull roar in my ears, a stark contrast to the nervous flutter in my chest. Mr. Abernathy, a man whose wealth dripped from him like a bad cologne, had just made his announcement. His voice, amplified by the microphone, echoed through the ostentatious ballroom, bouncing off the crystal chandeliers and the smug faces of his equally privileged guests. And now, ladies and gentlemen, a special treat. We have the pleasure of being serenaded by Delilah, our very own waitress, who I understand harbors a secret talent for the piano. A smattering of polite applause rippled through the room, but I could feel the weight of his eyes on me, a cold, calculating pressure. I knew what this was. It wasn't about showcasing a hidden talent. It was about humiliation. It was about reminding me, in front of his elite circle, exactly where I stood in his world. Beneath him, serving him. I'd been working at the Abernathy mansion for almost 3 months, a temporary gig arranged through an agency. The money was good, desperately needed to keep my head above water. I'd swallowed my pride, ignored the subtle condescension in his tone, the way his gaze lingered just a little too long. I'd told myself it was a job, nothing more. But now, standing under the harsh spotlight, the piano gleaming like a malevolent grin, I knew he'd been planning this all along. The piano was a Steinway, a majestic beast of polished ebony. It sat on a raised platform, dominating the far end of the ballroom. As I walked towards it, the silence in the room intensified, broken only by the rustle of designer dresses and the murmur of hushed conversations. I could feel their eyes on me, dissecting me, judging me. I imagined what they were thinking. A black waitress playing for them. How utterly novel. My hands trembled as I sat down on the plush velvet bench. I hadn't played in years. Not since everything fell apart. Music had been my life. I'd poured my heart and soul into the ivory keys, dreaming of concert halls and standing ovations. I had a scholarship to Juilliard, a future shimmering with promise. Then my mother got sick. The medical bills piled up, and dreams, like fragile things, shattered under the weight of reality. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to focus. The keys felt foreign beneath my fingertips. My mind raced, searching for a piece, something, anything to play. Should I play classical? Something they would recognize, something palatable to their refined tastes? Or should I? A slow smile spread across my face. My fingers stilled above the keys, and an idea, bold and audacious, began to take shape in my mind. It was a risky move, a defiant act. But in that moment, staring out at the sea of expectant faces, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I closed my eyes, and I began to play. It wasn't Beethoven. It wasn't Mozart. It was the blues. Raw, guttural, and soulful. Notes poured from the piano, telling a story of heartbreak, resilience, and enduring spirit of a people. It was the blues my grandmother used to sing on the porch of our small house in Mississippi, the blues that had comforted me through countless sleepless nights. The room, initially buzzing with anticipation, fell silent. I could feel their confusion, their discomfort. This wasn't the polite, predictable entertainment they had expected. This was something else. As I played, memories flooded my mind. Images of my grandmother, her weathered hands calloused from years of working the land, her voice rich with wisdom and pain. Images of my mother, her smile fading as the illness consumed her, her strength unwavering until the very end. Images of my own struggles, the sacrifices I had made, the dreams I had buried. The music swelled, becoming a lament, a protest, a celebration of survival. I poured every ounce of my being into the performance, channeling my anger, my frustration, my hope into the keys. The piano became an extension of my soul, a voice for the voiceless. I opened my eyes and the world seemed to sharpen. The blurred faces of the audience snapped into focus. Mr. Abernathy stood rigid, his face a mask of fury. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected me. The blues morphed into gospel, the tempo picking up, the mood shifting from sorrow to defiance. My fingers danced across the keys, weaving a tapestry of sound that filled the ballroom. I sang along, my voice clear and strong, echoing the hymns I had learned in church as a child. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. The words resonated with a power that surprised even me. It wasn't just a song, it was a declaration of my worth, my dignity, my refusal to be defined by their prejudices. I saw a few faces in the crowd begin to change. A few heads started to nod. A few feet started to tap. The music was reaching them, bypassing their carefully constructed walls of privilege and prejudice, speaking directly to their humanity. And then something unexpected happened. A woman, sitting near the front, began to clap, tentatively at first, then with increasing enthusiasm. She was an older woman, impeccably dressed, her face etched with the wisdom of a life well lived. Her applause broke the spell. Others joined in, hesitantly at first, then with growing conviction. The ballroom erupted in a cacophony of clapping and cheering. I looked at Mr. Abernathy. His face was ashen. His eyes were filled with a mixture of rage and disbelief. He hadn't humiliated me. I had humiliated him. I finished the song, the final notes hanging in the air like a challenge. The applause was deafening. People were on their feet, shouting, cheering, their faces flushed with excitement. I stood up, took a bow, and walked off the stage. I didn't look at Mr. Abernathy. I didn't need to. I knew I had won. I made my way through the crowd, people reaching out to touch my hand, to offer words of praise. A young man in a tuxedo stopped me. "That was incredible," he said, his eyes shining. "I've never heard anything like it." "Thank you," I said, smiling. Are you a professional musician?" he asked. "I used to be," I said. "Life got in the way." "Well, you should be again," he said. "You have a gift." I thanked him again and continued towards the exit. I needed to get out of there, to breathe fresh air, to feel the ground beneath my feet. As I reached the door, I saw Mr. Abernathy storming towards me. His face was contorted with anger. "How dare you?" he hissed, grabbing my arm. I wrenched my arm away. "How dare I what, Mr. Abernathy?" I said, my voice calm but firm. "How dare I play the piano? How dare I share my music? How dare I be myself?" He sputtered, unable to find the words to express his rage. "You think you humiliated me." I continued, "You think you put me in my place? You're wrong. You only showed everyone who you really are, a small, pathetic man hiding behind his wealth and his privilege." I paused, taking a deep breath. "And you know what, Mr. Abernathy? I pity you." I turned and walked out, leaving him standing there, speechless. The night air was cool and crisp against my skin. I walked down the long driveway, away from the mansion, away from the party, away from Mr. Abernathy. As I walked, I thought about what had just happened. I had faced my tormentor, I had stood up for myself, and I had emerged victorious. It wasn't just about the music, although that had played a part. It was about reclaiming my dignity, about refusing to be defined by someone else's prejudice. But the story doesn't end there. Revenge, I've learned, isn't a single act. It's a slow burn, a carefully orchestrated symphony of actions that culminate in a satisfying crescendo. Leaving Abernathy's party was just the first note. I didn't go back to the agency. I didn't need them anymore. The young man in the tuxedo, the one who had been so impressed with my playing, had given me his card. He was a music producer. I hesitated for a week, battling the lingering fear that I wasn't good enough, that my dreams were too far-fetched. But then I remembered Mr. Abernathy's sneering face, and the fire in my belly reignited. I called the producer. Within a month, I was in a recording studio, laying down tracks. It was exhilarating, terrifying, and the most fulfilling thing I had done in years. I poured my heart and soul into the music, drawing inspiration from my past, from my struggles, from my triumphs. The album was a blend of blues, gospel, and soul. a reflection of my journey. It was raw, honest, and unapologetically me. The producer, whose name was David, was a genius. He understood my vision and helped me bring it to life. He believed in me, even when I doubted myself. The album was released to critical acclaim. People connected with the music, with the stories I was telling. It wasn't just a collection of songs. It was a testament to the power of resilience, the importance of hope, the enduring strength of the human spirit. I started touring, playing small venues at first, then larger ones. The crowds grew with each show. People were singing my songs, dancing to my music, sharing their own stories with me. My star was rising, and then the invitation arrived. It was an invitation to perform at a charity gala, hosted by none other than Mr. Abernathy. My first instinct was to refuse. The thought of being in the same room with him, of facing his judgment again, filled me with dread. But then I thought about all the people who had supported me, all the people who believed in me, all the people who had been inspired by my music. And I thought about Mr. Abernathy, his face contorted with rage as I walked out of his party. And I smiled. I accepted the invitation. The gala was even more lavish than the party I had worked at. The ballroom was filled with the same faces, the same smug expressions, the same air of entitlement. Mr. Abernathy greeted me at the door, his smile strained. "Delilah," he said, his voice dripping with false cordiality. "It's good to see you again." "Mr. Abernathy," I said, my voice cool and polite. "Thank you for inviting me." He led me to the stage, his hand lingering a little too long on my arm. "I'm sure our guests will be delighted with your performance," he said. I smiled. "I'm counting on it." I waited in the wings, listening to the opening speeches, feeling the familiar flutter of nerves in my chest. David squeezed my hand. "You got this," he said. I took a deep breath and walked onto the stage. The applause was polite but muted. I could feel their skepticism, their curiosity. They were wondering if I had changed, if I had become more palatable. I sat down at the piano, the same Steinway I had played before. I looked out at the audience and saw Mr. Abernathy, sitting at the head table, his eyes fixed on me. I smiled, and I began to play. But this time it wasn't the blues. It wasn't gospel. It was something different. It was a song I had written myself, a song about my journey, about my struggles, about my triumphs. It was a song about finding your voice, about reclaiming your power, about refusing to be silenced. The music filled the ballroom, resonating with a strength and a passion that I had never felt before. I sang with all my heart, pouring every ounce of my being into the performance. As I sang, I saw the faces in the audience begin to change. The smug expressions faded, replaced by something else: respect, admiration, even empathy. I looked at Mr. Abernathy. His face was no longer contorted with rage. It was blank. He looked lost, confused, defeated. I finished the song, the final notes echoing through the ballroom. The silence was deafening, and then the applause erupted. It was louder, more enthusiastic, more genuine than anything I had ever heard. People were on their feet, cheering, shouting, their faces shining. I stood up, took a bow, and looked at Mr. Abernathy. He stood up, his face pale, and walked out of the ballroom. He left his own party. I watched him go, a wave of satisfaction washing over me. It wasn't just about humiliating him in front of his peers. It was about showing him that he couldn't control me, that he couldn't silence me, that he couldn't break me. I had taken his attempt at humiliation and turned it into a victory. I had used his prejudice as fuel for my fire. I had risen above his pettiness and achieved my dreams. And in that moment, I realized that revenge wasn't just about punishing your tormentors. It was about healing yourself. It was about reclaiming your power. It was about creating a life that was so full, so vibrant, so meaningful that it left your enemies in the dust. The party continued without him. People congratulated me, offered me opportunities, and celebrated my success. But the greatest reward was the feeling of freedom, the knowledge that I had overcome adversity and emerged stronger than ever.